Good afternoon. Okay. Welcome, and I want to thank all of you for coming to this event. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael Hanchard. I'm the chair of the Africana Studies Department and director of the Marginalized Populations Project, of which this is related to. This forum, I want first also thank all the sponsors who've helped make this possible, particularly the staff at the Center for Africana Studies, once again, done a fantastic job. This forum basically is the outgrowth of a course I've been teaching over the past 2 years on the relationship between fascism and racism. And the course was designed in light of events over the past several years when right-wing authoritarian populist, xenophobic, and outright fascist social movements in different parts of the world have sometimes turned into governments. For many commentators and concerned citizens, the upsurge in right-wing political tendencies across Europe, West and East, the United States, parts of Asia and Latin America, Brazil, for one example, we'll discuss today, is gloomily reminiscent of the 1920s and the 1930s, when the rise of fascism affected domestic politics and foreign policy in various nation states across the world. By the 1930s, made the distinction between Allied and Axis powers not particularly helpful in explaining the networks and linkages between fascists and between Nazis and other fascists in Europe and those in the United States, Asia, and Latin America. What the Allied and Axis powers shared in common was their legacy, ongoing in many instances, of racial rule, whether in the colony, whether in their principal territories and polities, or in their colonies in Latin America, the Caribbean, South Asia, and of course, Africa. One of the lessons underscored in our course, and the students can vouch for this, is that racial rule, whether in non-contiguous colonial form, settler colonies, or apartheid rule, long preceded fascism. Yet racial rule has helped and continues to animate fascist ideologies, visions of world domination, and their efforts to implement and impose their fantasies upon the rest of us, particularly with the imagery of black and brown peoples as interlopers, bearers of crime, disease, and miscegenation. The three activists here today have their own practical concerns with the relationship between fascism and racism and how to push back against them both. As a means of socializing our discussion from the classroom and extending it from the classroom to the broader public sphere, I thought it would be a good idea to have individuals from entirely different political, social, and cultural contexts discuss with us and help us understand what's it like to be on the front lines where one quickly has to make distinctions between academic reason, practical rationale, amidst the looming specter of violence and coercion. And I want to introduce the activists today in the order of their presentations, and then I want to sort of lay out some of the questions I gave them, which informed their responses, which they will deliver today. First up will be Dow Lamont Jenkins to the right, the founder and executive director of One People's Project, a New Brunswick, New Jersey-based anti-hate organization that researches, monitors, and reports on right-wing groups and individuals that seek to polarize communities. Founded in 2000 and working under the motto, quote, hate has consequences, unquote, OPP became a go-to resource on such matters and has been instrumental in the fight against hate. Mr. Jenkins has appeared in a variety and been aired on a variety of different media outlets and venues, among them the Rachel Maddow Show, Fox News, CNN, and the AM Joy with Joy Reid, as well as in documentaries focusing on Antifa's fight against the so-called alt-right. One such documentary is Alt-Right, Age of Rage, which is currently available on Netflix, and another, Erasing Hate, which has been turned into a major motion picture called Skin. It will have its U.S. premiere next week, the Tribeca Film Festival, and will be released widely on July 26th. Right? Second up is Jessica da Silva, currently a visiting scholar at New York University, who holds a master's degree in history, teaching, and is a doctoral student in education from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She's a historian and history teacher in the State Secretary of Education of Rio de Janeiro since 2012, and also a member of the Laboratory of Studies and Research in History, the Teaching of History, and group studies on anti-racist education. Finally, third, last but not least, is Nicola Dieng. Nicola was born in Naples, southern Italy, on March 26, 2001. His mother is an Italian from Naples, his father Mauritanian. He's currently in his last year of high school, specializing in classical and humanistic studies, with the hope of majoring in the study of politics as an undergraduate. Since 2014, he's been a member of the political collective 081, a mutual aid laboratory, and he'll define for us what that is. And he's a founding member of the Neapolitan Autonomous Student Organization, an anti-fascist organization based in Naples. This organization is constantly in contact with similar anti-fascist movements across Europe. Finally, Matthias Hanchard, a Neapolitan native himself, and like Nicola, an Afro-Italiano, will serve as translator from Italian and Neapolitan to English. To get the conversation started, I asked each activist to respond to the following questions. How did you first get involved in anti-fascist, anti-racist movements, and how old were you? Was there a personal reason or singular event that caused you to get involved? For you, what's the difference between anti-fascist and anti-racist work? Does it matter? Does the distinction matter? Are you a minority in the anti-fascist organizations you work with? Are you a minority in your anti-racist organizations? Is coalition building difficult across these and other organizations? And finally, what does fascism mean to you? Each panelist will have 20 minutes to respond to these questions and provide some context for their personal experiences, followed by about 20 minutes of interaction between the panelists and the audience. To allow as many audience members an opportunity to engage the speakers, I'd kindly urge the audience to pose a succinct question, not a speech or protracted commentary on issues that may or may not have anything to do with fascism, racial rule, or the panel itself. I've seen it happen too many times. So one final warning for some of the members in the audience. Some of the panelists' responses to my questions will contain strong language that some audience members may find racially offensive or offensive in other ways. If you're uncomfortable with this aspect of the forum, then I would suggest you seek your information about the relationship between fascism and racism elsewhere. This is what I consider a grown-up panel, people dealing with not only difficult dialogues, but difficult everyday experiences. So I want to start out with Darryl, One People's Project. You'd rather come up here or sit there? Okay. Okay. What's that? Yeah. I got your response too, if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. I want to thank UPenn for having us. I want to thank Michael and the Center for Africana Studies for putting this on. I think it's really important in this day and age. But truth be told, it's important in any day and age. So when this is all over, if it's all over, we got to learn from it, and we are going to have to make sure we salt the earth so that this never happens again, this political climate that we're in today. Let's face it, this is not the first time we've seen this. Fascism has reared its head throughout the course of history. It wasn't always called fascism. Sometimes it's called nativism. The thing is, we're always trying to figure out how to fight it. And the thing is, whenever you have a society that grows and innovates and builds, eventually there are going to be certain traditions that come out of it. And those traditions people want to maintain those traditions. But we always have to evolve. We always have to grow. So those who are trying to evolve, trying to grow, trying to change are going to be a threat to those who want to maintain the traditions that we have outgrown. So that's who we fight, sometimes to the death. And unfortunately, we are in a rather precarious point in this day and age where it can get really bad. It hasn't been really bad here in the States. I could think of places around the globe that has been far, far worse than what we have dealt with. I mean, we look at Charlottesville, and I went to Charlottesville, but that's just a blip compared to what we have seen in, say, I don't know, maybe you can look at Italy, you can look at France, you can look at Germany right now and see how the tensions are there. But I think the question that we're always asking is, how do we keep this from happening? And the only way we are going to be able to do that is if we have education, if we understand exactly what it is we're dealing with. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to give you some of the knowledge and some of the understandings that I have had over the 30 years that I have been doing this myself. The first question here was, how did I first get involved in the anti-fascist and anti-racist movement? And I always tell this story. I started out when I was a kid. I was 11 years old. I was really curious about history thanks to my parents. My father was a teacher. My mother was a missionary, is a missionary. And basically education was the family business. Education was the family business, so me being a bookworm, I took to it like water, like a fish to water. And, my favorite pastime was reading the encyclopedia and reading history, and particularly black history, and in particular the Civil Rights Movement. I was born in 1968, the year that Martin Luther King was killed. I was born maybe 3 or 4 months later. And I've always wondered, when I would read about the Civil Rights Movement, we as black people seem to be doing all right after the Civil Rights Movement, but what happened to all the people we were fighting? And then I would read in my weekly reader when I'm 10 years old, and I see that, the Klan is still around, and that struck my curiosity, wondering what they were up to, what did they think they was going to accomplish in the day and age where we are becoming a part of society more and more. This is the way I'm thinking when I'm 10 years old. Then, cut to maybe 1987, I'm in the Air Force, and I'm watching the Oprah Winfrey Show. And they had a story on neo-Nazis that they call skinheads, for the sake of argument. And I decided it was time for me to start documenting these folks, because if they want to play, we gotta beat them at their game. So I would start documenting anytime I would see on TV whatever it was that they were saying. I would just dub the videos that I would see on Oprah or Donahue or that infamous Geraldo show. And then I started listening to talk radio here in the States, and I started recognizing that the things that I heard the Nazis say on these talk shows, they were saying on talk radio and giving it legitimacy. So I started recording that, and it just snowballed, and just basically me focusing on right-wing politics. And then One People's Project started in 2000 because there was a neo-Nazi rally that was taking place in Morristown, New Jersey. We wanted to organize around it. We put up a website to organize around it. And I had all the information about a lot of these individuals we were dealing with. And that was the birth of One People's Project. One People's Project spent 13 years here in Philly. We just left. I was here since about 2005. And because New Jersey, we originally started in New Jersey, and I needed to go where the work was. And I landed in Philly. And, there was a group out here, they called themselves the Keystone State Skinheads. Now they call themselves Keystone United. And they was pretty active in Philadelphia. They had an annual rally every October around Columbus Day on Boathouse Road at that Viking statue that's no longer with us. And we used to go out there every year and just protest them and try to make their little event harder and harder each year for them to have. And eventually they just disappeared from the city to some degree. There's still some vestiges of them here. But then I noticed, as of 2016, when Trump started growing and the so-called alt-right along with them started gaining momentum, that this thing was larger than Philly. This thing was going all over the place, and they were starting to get into positions of power. So we decided that we had to go out to various places and meet them wherever they were, and Charlottesville was one of those places. So that's where I began. That's my history. And now we're back in New Jersey because that's where the work is now. There's a lot of individuals that we have to deal with there. And I would say, someone says that there's, one of the questions was there a personal reason or singular event that caused me to get involved? And I say, for the most part, I'm pretty much someone who thought this might be something that needed to be done. We all have our roles to play. This is mine. This is me saying, hey, it's time to grab the bull by the horns and contribute something. This is how I contribute. And another question is based on your experience. Are you a minority in the anti-fascist organizations you work with? Are you a minority in your anti-fascist organizations? Now, when you talk about Antifa in the United States, you're talking about predominantly white males. Yes, that is true. But it will be unfair and particularly insulting to suggest that we're not involved as people of color. I'm a black man. I've been involved with this since I was a kid. My father was involved with it before me. So everyone who was against fascism is going to be anti-fascist. Martin Luther King was anti-fascist. Okay, he was Antifa. So don't get it twisted. Just because you see white people in the streets, that's a beautiful thing to see that they want to step up to this game and step up and fight. But remember, people of color are going to lead the charge because we're one of the first people they want to go after. And it says, one of the other questions is, what do you think makes your national or local experiences different from other countries' experiences with this phenomena? And this is important for us. We have been in way too comfortable a position for too many generations, so much so that we miss a lot of the threats. I made the point when we were talking earlier. I was watching Chris Matthews one day, and he was talking about how stable we were as a country, how stable we have been for 150 years. There's a difference between what we have been going through for the past 150 years and what other countries around the world have. It's been a long time since we've seen a war on these shores. 150 years ago was the Civil War, and that's been it. Every other war that we have fought since then have been over there, as the song goes. So because of that, we have been able to stabilize ourselves to the point that we were able to build our industry, be able to build our commerce. And also forget that there were some people that were not able to enjoy it. We allowed the robber barons to just run roughshod over us. We allowed corporate industry to run roughshod over us. And a lot of people of color, a lot of people who have been marginalized otherwise were invisible, until just recently. You're starting to look now and you see the demographics changing just over the past 20 years alone. You start seeing the demographics changing in commerce, in education, in academia, in government. Because at some point we said that, we want to be a part of this. We want to contribute to our society. And what we are fighting today are the people who never wanted that to happen, who always tried to keep that from happening. And they realized, and I'm just going to say, with the election of Obama, that they failed. So now what we are seeing today is a Hail Mary on their part. So when you ask me what fascism means to me, I'm going to tell you fascism is a right-wing ideology, weird and aggressive nationalism forced upon the people of a particular society. Emphasis on the word forced. We don't want this. We make it clear that we don't want this. We're better than this. We know we are a better people than what the political climate suggests we are. So I'm glad that everyone is here trying to learn and trying to understand how do we go forward. Because for us to fight that aggressive nationalism that's being forced upon us right now, we are going to have to recognize it, and we're going to have to call it out without any threats that we get from that other side. And believe me, there are. They're trying to make themselves out to be the victim, as we've seen with Candace Owens when she came here last week, as I had to deal with also last week, because one of the people that I was going after, that I had written about, decided to take what I had written about him and try to file a criminal charge against me. This was going on over the past month. He's a public defender in Jersey City, and I had written about it, So he decided to file a criminal complaint saying that I was cyber stalking him and engaging in bias harassment because I called him white and Italian. Those charges got dismissed just yesterday. So, but it's not over, because now we have to deal with a person who is a public defender, who is an associate of a lot of these hate groups, who is working to represent black and brown people that he does not like. That's an issue. Of course he's going to come after me to keep him from doing that. But that's the kind of things that we are all going to have to deal with in some fashion. Because if we are going to, how should I say, if we are going to beat this back, if we are going to prevail over this political climate, it's going to take that education. It's going to take that understanding, which is why I'm very glad that y'all are here today. And I want to thank you much for your time. Thank you.
Next is Jessica Hernandez de Souza.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Professor Hanchard, for the invitation. Let me just check something here. Found it. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. It's a good pleasure to be here and talk a little about what has happened in Brazil. And as Professor Hanchard said, I teach history in Rio de Janeiro public schools. And doing my job, I got involved in the anti-racist struggle. I was 24 years old at the time, and although I had already noticed how racism was present in schools when I was a student, it was as a teacher in classrooms of Baixada Fluminense, one of the poorest and blackest areas in Rio de Janeiro, that I realized the urgency of being more committed with the struggle against Eurocentrism, colonialism, and racism, which still prevailed in school curricula all around Brazil. Seeking answers to these issues, I abandoned my research object, which was about building documents of Milanese churches in the 4th century, to begin the master's degree in teaching Afro-Brazilian history and culture at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. During the course, I met and joined the group of studies and research on anti-racist education, coordinated by Professor Amilcar Pereira. And there I met a group of colleagues that, like me, sought strategies and contents to make their pedagogical practice anti-racist. Black or anti-racist movements have a long history in struggle against fascism in Brazil. Since the dictatorships implanted in the 30s and in the 60s, due to this struggle, we have some achievements after the end of the military dictatorship, such as the criminalization of racism, the recognition and demarcation of Quilombolas land, and the Law 10639 in 2003, which made it mandatory the teaching of Afro-Brazilian history and culture in K-12 education. More recently, however, these achievements are being seriously threatened as the political crisis that has spread in Brazil in 2013 has reunited anti-democratic, worse. You got it, right? And racist voices. As I said earlier, racism and authoritarian governments are not new in Brazil. We have dealt with this before. Still, it was scary to see how the conservative reaction was articulated and conquered young and old, rich and poor, not only giving way to increasingly explicit manifestations of racism, homophobia, and sexism, but also having popularity to elect a president. That was unprecedented. Bolsonaro is a former military man and has a political career of almost 30 years as a congressman. So long before the 2018 election campaign, the so-called president and his supporters didn't hide their fascist government project by defending an exacerbated nationalism, supporting and even honoring torturers, proposing the return of the military dictatorship, saying that women should earn lower wages because they get pregnant and are weak, saying that homosexuality can be or should be healed with violence, and that no one likes gay people. And finally, that blacks are lazy, loafer, and don't even serve to procreate. Procreate is a term used for sexual relations between animals, at least in Portuguese. The president has also been openly opposed to reparation policies, like affirmative actions, with the poor arguments, by the way, and seems to get back the tone of racial democracy, stating things like, "Our color is Brazil." These are just some of the barbarities that he said in the campaign. I followed Bolsonaro's ascension process in crowded classrooms with mostly black students, and kept asking myself how he has become so popular. Even today, many people wonder how he was elected. This is a very complex question, but some points can be highlighted. His campaign was based on nationalism, Christian fundamentalism, moral conservatism, and a wave of fake news. Does it sound familiar? So, calling himself an outsider of Brazilian political sphere, a novelty in the scenario marked by corruption scandals, and also as an advocate of what he calls the traditional Brazilian family, which means of the privilege of middle-high class heterosexual white men. Bolsonaro fled the presidential debates and created phantom threats. The greatest example of this are the myths of gender ideology and ideological indoctrination. With simple language and controversial speeches scattered on social networks, the Bolsonaro family, we have 4 of them, the father and 3 sons, incited the hatred against teachers and educators, accused of encouraging or teaching children to be homosexuals, of implanting a gay dictatorship using this kind of material that you can see here. Intellectuals and artists have been attacked for supposedly implanting a Marxist ideology or a leftist ideology, as they like to say, in schools, universities, films, and culture in general, what they call cultural Marxism. And it sounds no sense, right? However, many people believe it. Fake news and controversy don't pay for an election. And they can't elect a president by themselves. So it's necessary to mention, even quickly, Bolsonaro's commitment to the neoliberal agenda, which includes pension reform, reduction of the minimum wage, attacks on the labor laws, and promotion of privatizations. During the process of ascension and election, it's necessary to emphasize the decisive role of Christian churches in the legitimation of these ideas. Religious leaders have not only supported, but also used parts of the Bible to legitimize the presidential candidates' words and attitudes, and took advantage of this situation to popularize their religious agenda, like measures against abortion, especially ensuring the criminalization, and demonizing LGBTQ and black culture. The attacks on Afro-Brazilian culture have taken place in different ways, from the cutting of financing to physical and symbolic violence. We are witnessing the cut of funds that financed museums such as the Negro Museum in Rio de Janeiro, closed this month of March, and Afro-Brazil Museum, which is being threatened to close. The Pier of Valongo, that place where about 1 million enslaved people arrived in Rio de Janeiro until 1831, one of the most important and sensitive memory sites of slavery in the Americas, may lose the title of Patrimony of Humanity due to the due to the abandonment and consequent non-compliance with the norms demanded by UNESCO. Even the carnival has been threatened with the budget cuts and the demoralization campaign made by the president himself on his Twitter. In terms of religion, the situation only worsens. There are numerous cases of candomblé and Ubanda yards invaded and depredated by neo-Pentecostal pastors and believers. Such situations contradict the policies implemented in recent years, such as Decree on Intangible Heritage in 2000 and the Law 10639 in 2003, which decolonized the notion of heritage and historical narratives in Brazil. They also reinforce the ideas that Afro-Brazilian people have no culture and no history. In turn to all this, the president, who was still campaigning at the time, answered that there is no like state. Brazil above everything, God above all, became his motto. According to him, he would not rule for the minorities because the minorities should bow to the majorities. In schools, parents are increasingly resistant to teaching Afro-Brazilian history and culture, encouraged by religious racism and fundamentalism. To reinforce this position, there is a congressional project called School Without Party, which in general aims to exclude discussions about race, gender, and class of school curricula. Only the existence of the project has already incited parents and students to police the statements of teachers, creating a climate of tension and censorship in classrooms. One of the worst developments in the statements of Bolsonaro has been the impact on his thousands of followers. With him leading the presidential polls and now occupying the presidency, his voters have felt legitimated, even comfortable, to commit acts of violence. The targets are women, blacks, LGBTQ, and poor people. In social networks, it's easy to see how people feel more and more free to disseminate hatred speech against minorities. The results of Atlas of Violence in 2018 indicate an increase in the number of deaths of black women and that 71.5% of murdered victims per year are black or brown. The high mortality rate of black women over the black population in general already existed in Brazil, but it was undoubtedly a crime. Today, with the growth of fascism, it has become justifiable, even tolerable. In relation to Afro-Brazilians, Bolsonaro's racism is more dangerous than the offensive statements that he makes. His defense of facilitation of weapon carrying, the defense of death penalty, and the militarization of the state, besides the adoptions of policies that deepen the socioeconomic inequalities, directly affect Afro-Brazilians' population. Recently, a young black man was killed because the policeman confused a drilling machine with a gun. A security guard in a supermarket, in front of several cameras and many people, killed another young black man. He had mental disorders, so his behavior was considered suspect. A 12-year-old boy, Afro-Brazilian boy, Kawan, died after being shot during a police operation in a favela. According to the police department, it was a stray bullet, a side effect. A few years ago, precisely 15 days ago, a few days ago, was accidentally shot, a family was accidentally shot 80 times by the army, killing a father in front of his 7-year-old son, accidentally. It is what the army says. All the cases I just mentioned happened this year, and it is still April. All cases involve someone in an institutional uniform murdering black people. All the assassins claim that they did it by accident, even the 8 shots. None of the killers were punished, and the president made no statement blaming them. According to him, accidents just happen. The Bolsonaro government has faced the great opposition. The rejection of his candidacy united the social movements of different ideologies, representing minority and disadvantaged groups, anti-racist, feminists, LGBTQ, syndicalists. I don't think there is an opposition between anti-fascism and anti-racism. Anti-racist movements, in my point of view, are a fundamental part of this larger movement of resistance to fascism. As I already said, Black movements, all anti-racist movements, have a long trajectory and expertise in the anti-fascist struggle and would not be different in what concerns the Bolsonaro government, especially since the genocide of Black population seems to be a state policy. Ninguém solta a mão de ninguém, or translating literally, nobody lets go of anyone's hands, just like not him, maybe you heard about it, was one of the slogans that resonate with what we might call an anti-fascist coalition. A reminder that the resistance continues. Racial, class, and gender differences, which often alienate the activists engaged in these movements, have been relieved in the name of fighting a common enemy, which I find positive at a time when it's so important to have allies and that the enemy have strickling and repudiating features. It does not seem to be the best time to deepen differences among groups that are allies. I think it would be and can be very interesting to anti-racist movements to take advantage of this convergence of interests to raise awareness of our demands. However, in terms of analysis, it must be said that this coalition has limits. In my experience as a Black and peripheral woman, I have to say that I feel very helpless when I think of the place that we Afro-Brazilians occupy in this resistance. I will give an example. A dog died a few months ago in a Brazilian supermarket. Everyone, intellectuals, soap opera stars, soccer players, stood for the case. There was thousands of complaints on social networks about the state of gratuitous violence that we live, about the impunity of the murderers. There was filters on Facebook, hashtags on Twitter and Instagram in solidarity with the poor puppy. The media massively charging the authorities about the punishment of those responsible. I love dogs. The problem is that less than a month later, a 19-year-old boy, that one I mentioned before, was suffocated to death inside a supermarket. Where were these people? Where were the mobilization? Where were our allies? Who stood up for him? In the protests against Pedro's murders, which had much, much, much less repercussion than the dogs, the presence of almost all Blacks were evident. No hashtags, no filters on Facebook, no punishment. The man who killed him is free. The man who killed the dog was arrested. Can you see where I'm going? What I want to highlight is that often it seems to me that the partnership has some limits. First, our deaths do not cause shock or empathy, do not generate hashtags nor filters on social networks. It's something that Frantz Fanon would explain very well as he says, Black people live in a non-being zone. The resistance against Bolsonaro is broad. We are all in the same struggle against fascism, but no one is dying in the noble quarters, universities, and other elite spaces. The victims of current fascism in Brazil have color and class. For me, it's very clear that we are the target. and we are targets that are easy to attain. The death of Marielle Franco was a warning. To be an elected councilwoman for thousands of people and have access to protection that comprises being a parliamentarian doesn't make a black woman untouchable. The shots that killed her were also directed at all black men and women, telling us that any of you can be the next. And it frightens me to think that our companions, many of our white upper middle class allies against the fascism, may not go to the streets and stand for our blood. They didn't go for the boys from Costa Barros, shot more than 100 times. One of them was a student of my mother who I saw growing up. Neither the boy murdered in the supermarket, nor for the father who died in front of his son with 80 shots. Do not get me wrong. I'm not speaking against an anti-fascist coalition. It's important and necessary, not only moments of crisis like Brazil is experiencing nowadays. I just want to point out the differences in power relations within the anti-fascist bloc, noting that Afro-Brazilians are more vulnerable and more likely to suffer state repression, and that whiteness sometimes shows its face, regardless of political positions and struggles in common. I feel that we have to be always alert, because here and there is friendly fire, which makes me think that every anti-racist is anti-fascist, but not every anti-fascist is in fact anti-racist. Thank you.
Would like to sit here?
Yeah, we prefer. Okay.
I think your mic's already on.
Okay. It works? Ok. Ho cominciato a fare politica quando avevo 13 anni, 5 anni fa, grazie al collettivo della mia scuola.
I started to become involved in politics 5 years ago when I was 13, thanks to the student collective in my school.
In Italia, i movimenti sociali hanno l'abitudine di organizzare la politica studentesca fin dalla scuola in assemblea a cadenza settimanale o bisettimanale, nelle quali si prendono decisioni inerenti a tutte le varie iniziative e le varie mobilitazioni che si fanno in città. Il collettivo si basa su un principio fondamentale, l'orizontalismo.
In Italy, social movements are used to organize and mobilize high school students in weekly or bi-weekly meetings. Students are called to discuss and make decisions on political mobilization and other initiatives at the city level. The collective is based on a fundamental principle, horizontalism.
Per orizzontalismo intendo la mancanza di un'organizzazione verticale. Infatti la parola di ogni membro del collettivo ha lo stesso valore di quella di un altro membro. E le decisioni vengono prese esclusivamente in assemblea. La mancanza di ruoli gerarchici, quindi, ci dà la possibilità di non riprodurre processi di sopraffazione all'interno della nostra comunità.
By horizontalism, I mean a non-vertical organization where every member of the collective has a right to speak and where his or her word has the same value of any other member's word. The decisions are only made in the assembly. The lack of hierarchical roles allows our community not to reproduce processes of abuse or misuse of power.
L'orizontalismo riproduce a sua volta processi di democrazia diretta, molto diversi da quelli promossi dalla democrazia neoliberale che si basa sui meccanismi di delega, utilizzando il voto come unica espressione decisionale. La democrazia diretta, invece, si basa sul mettersi in gioco in prima persona, partecipando attivamente appunto alle assemblee in cui vengono prese tutte le decisioni.
In turn, horizontalism reproduces processes of direct democracy, different from the neoliberal democracy that is based on mechanisms of delegation. For example, the use of the vote as the only way to participate in the decision-making process. Direct democracy means to be involved in the first person, actively participating in the assemblies where decisions are made.
Più volte però mi sono interrogato sul perché fin da piccolo ho avuto la necessità di prendere parte attivamente alla vita politica e solo col tempo ho capito che cosa mi ha spinto a prendermi certe responsabilità. Nel mio paese sono un unicum, nel senso che nel giro dei movimenti di cui faccio parte, a livello nazionale e internazionale, i non bianchi si contano sulle dita di una mano.
Several times I wondered why I needed to actively participate in politics from a very young age. Eventually, I realized what pushed me to take on certain responsibilities. In my country, I'm an oddity, in the sense that nationally there are very few non-whites in social movements.
L'Italia è un paese retrogrado, ancora vittima dell'influenza che la Chiesa Cattolica in primis e poi il fascismo hanno esercitato sulle persone. Essere neri in Italia non è una cosa normale. Siamo pochi e sempre sotto la lente di ingrandimento. Sentiamo sempre che dobbiamo qualcosa a qualcuno, che questo non è il nostro paese e che la nostra inclusione è quasi un atto di carità cristiana.
Italy is a conservative country, still influenced firstly by the Catholic Church and then by fascism. To be black in Italy is not the norm. We are few people and we are always under constant observation as under a magnifying glass. We always feel like we owe everybody something, like this is not our country, like our inclusion is an act of Christian charity.
Per la gente comune, se sei nero, sei di conseguenza povero, perché sicuramente scappi dalla guerra e non sai parlare bene l'italiano, perché sei arrivato sicuramente qui da poco. Si stenta a pensare che un negro è stanziale e che possa avere una provenienza sociale non per forza sottoproletaria, come nel mio caso.
People think of black people as poor since they escaped war and famine and they do not speak Italian fluently as they just arrived from another country. People struggle to think that a black man can be a citizen and not a migrant, that he is not necessarily from an underclass, as such in my case.
Nei programmi televisivi, nei film, non ci sono personaggi neri. In tutta la cultura di massa, noi non siamo contemplati, quasi come se fossimo qualcosa da tenere nascosto e non facessimo parte del corpo della nazione.
The main characters in cinema or television are not black. We are not visible in mass culture, almost as if we are something to be kept hidden, not a part of the body of the nation.
Io sono ancora di più un unicum, perché non ho neanche la possibilità di evidenziare la contraddizione, perché non sono negro, sono quello che i francesi chiamano un métis, cioè figlio di madre italiana e di padre africano, di una bianca e di un negro.
I feel even more an oddity because I'm not a Negro, but what in French is called a métis, son of an Italian mother and an African father, of a white woman and a black man.
A volte mi chiedo, oltre la pelle, che cosa ho di nero? Non ho le tradizioni, non ho la cultura, non ho la religione che caratterizzano la presenza negra anche nella diaspora. Ho soltanto il mio smartphone, con cui chiamo in Mauritania di tanto in tanto la mia famiglia.
Therefore, I do not embody that contradiction. Sometimes I ask myself, what kind of black man am I? Beyond my skin, I don't have any tradition, any culture, any religion, which characterizes my Negro presence, not even as a diaspora. I only have my smartphone, which I sometimes use to call my family in Mauritania.
Ma poi mi ricordo che una cosa invece ce l'ho, la consapevolezza. La consapevolezza di non voler diventare un negro da cortile, sperando che Malcolm X non si rivolti nella tomba concedendomi l'utilizzo di questa espressione. Non voglio essere un nero asservito alle strutture bianche. Non voglio avere una vita tranquilla con un buon posto di lavoro e una bella casa, quando poi però all'esterno continuerei a vedere tanti fratelli che soffrono il peso di una società razzista.
However, I remember that I have something. I have consciousness. Not to become a backyard nigger, Malcolm X, please forgive me if I use this expression. I do not want to be a Negro enslaved in a white structure. I do not want to live a quiet life with a safe job and a beautiful house, while I see my brothers outside suffering in a racist society.
Per questo motivo faccio politica, perché voglio un mondo migliore e perché voglio un nuovo modello economico che riesca a pensare ai bisogni della gente e non ai bisogni di aziende multimiliardarie. Solo così potrei vivere serenamente con me stesso, perché non si nasce razzisti, è la società che ti fa diventare razzista se non hai gli strumenti per studiare e quindi di conseguenza per conoscere il mondo. Quindi se sei povero e sei depresso, hai molte più possibilità di essere razzista.
For this reason, I am politically engaged. I want a better world, a new economic system that suits people's needs and not transitional corporate interests. This is the only way I'm able to live peacefully with myself. Nobody is born racist. Society makes people racist. If you do not have the tools to know and study the world, if you are poor and depressed, you are much more likely to become racist.
Il razzismo, il fascismo, il sessismo, l'omofobia sono tutte facce della stessa medaglia, sono tutti strumenti di controllo sociale del potere.
Racism, fascism, sexism, and homophobia are all sides of the same coin. They are all means of social control in the hands of political power.
L'ho sempre pensato, ma l'ho capito poco tempo fa, quando ho iniziato a studiare le varie forme di colonialismo, prima tra tutte quella subita dal colonialismo italiano, dal meridione italiano, scusatemi. L'Italia vive rispetto al concetto stesso di colonialismo un doppio problema.
I always thought about it, but I really understood what it meant when I started to study the different forms of colonialism, especially in southern Italy. Italy experiences a double issue in relation with the concept of colonialism.
Da una parte vive una rimozione quasi totale del suo passato coloniale in Africa e del rapporto che questo passato crea con il fenomeno migratorio attuale. Dall'altra parte ha completamente rimosso il colonialismo interno su cui si è basata la nostra unità nazionale.
On the one hand, Italian colonial past in Africa was totally removed, as well as the relations of this past with the present migratory phenomenon. On the other hand, even an internal colonialism, which is the foundation of our national unity, has been removed.
Leggendo dei briganti, leggendo della storia di interi paesi del sud Italia, cancellati dalla cartina geografica come se alcune persone possano essere eliminate con un click, ho capito che, come diceva Fanon, l'essere colonizzati è uno stato psicologico, non solo una condizione mentale, non solo una condizione sociale.
When I read about Briganti, or about some villages in southern Italy utterly erased from national geography, deleted by a click of a mouse, like in a video game, when I read about thousands of women raped by a pure spirit of domination, I understood, as Fanon said, that to be considered a physiological status, not only a social condition.
Io sono colonizzato 2 volte, in quanto meridionale e in quanto nero. Perciò ringrazio di essere nato in una città dalle 1000 difficoltà come Napoli e di vivere in un quartiere popolare, perché forse se fossi nato in un'altra condizione non avrei neanche avuto la possibilità di rendermi conto di tutto questo.
I'm colonized twice, as a Southern Italian and as a black man. Therefore, I'm thankful to be born in a city with several challenges like Naples, and to live in a working class area, because if I was born elsewhere, perhaps I would not have to realize all that.
Probabilmente avrei pensato che il razzismo è semplicemente una lotta di neri contro bianchi, in cui puoi decidere che squadra tifare, come nel calcio. Può essere il bianco dominatore, oppure può essere il bianco amico dei neri, perché succube del senso di colpa, naturalmente. Può essere il nero che si impegna per uscire da questo stato di sottomissione, oppure può essere il nero che fa di tutto per essere accettato dai bianchi, perché ha interiorizzato la sua inferiorità. O nei casi peggiori, può essere quello che decide di astenersi, girandosi dall'altra parte come se l'argomento non lo riguardasse.
I would have probably thought that racism was simply a struggle between black and white, where it is just a matter of being a fan of one side or the other, like in a soccer game. You could either be the dominant white or the white man who is friend with the blacks because of his sense of guilt. You could be either the black man committed to get out of his state of submission, or you could be the black man who does everything to be accepted by the whites because he has internalized his inferiority. However, you could be, even worse, the one who decides to abstain, turning and looking away as if it does not concern him or her.
Il razzismo però non è un gioco, è semplicemente il sintomo di una vita che viviamo da oppressi. E nella mia vita voglio almeno provare a combattere questa oppressione.
Racism is not a game. It is the experience of living the oppressed. I would like to fight against the oppression in my life.
Mi sento però di presentare alcune considerazioni che esulano dalla mia vicenda personale e per quanto riguarda la questione del razzismo in Italia e il suo rapporto con i movimenti. Sono provocatorio, l'antirazzismo in Italia non esiste.
Now, I would like to present some thoughts on racism in Italy and its relationship with the movements beyond my personal story. I'm challenging here, anti-racism does not exist in Italy. I mean that, unlike other European countries, there's not a relationship between social movements and racialized subjectivities in Italy. These subjectivities have often been instrumentally politicized by right-wing forces, like the first black Italian senator, Tony Iwobi, candidate from Lega, a party which pursues xenophobic and explicitly racist agenda.
Ma anche da movimenti progressisti. Il caso del ministro Kyenge, candidato dal partito di ispirazione socialdemocratico, scelta come ministro di un fantomatico ministero dell'integrazione, facendo valere come competenza il colore della sua pelle.
They have been politicized also by progressive forces, like the case of the former minister Cecile Kyenge, candidate from the Democratic Party, a social democratic party, who was nominated minister of an elusive ministry of integration, claiming her skin as her competence and skills.
O ancor peggio, dai movimenti sociali. Una delle parole d'ordine usata in questi ambienti è quella dell'autonomia delle lotte migranti, autonomia negata nella maggior parte dei casi nei fatti, visto che il discorso antirazzista viene assimilato ad un generico discorso umanitario che prescinde da una contrapposizione tra le parti della società, oppure viene usato per fini di propaganda in cui i soggetti razzializzati finiscono per essere semplici testimonial della radicalità delle proprie istanze politiche, negando loro una vera e propria soggettività politica.
But even worse, black subjectivities have also been politically utilized by social movements under the general framework of the autonomy of immigrant struggle. This autonomy becomes a buzzword because it's de facto denied. In this case, the anti-racist discourse is assimilated to a more general humanitarian discourse, which overlooks the contradictions and struggles between different sectors of that society. It also used for propaganda where the racialized subjects become testimonial of radical political forces, while being denied their own political subjectivity and agency.
A tutto questo si aggiunge un altro elemento. Così come nella politica parlamentare o nel dibattito pubblico, anche nei movimenti giovanili riconosciuti per il loro essere radicali, mancano i non bianchi. Manca cioè la voce di tutti quelli che, pur affacciandosi sempre in maniera più forte e crescente nella vita del nostro paese, sport, scuola, università, mondo del lavoro, non partecipano e quantomeno si organizzano in movimenti di lotta, capaci di farsi portatori in prima persona delle istanze dei soggetti razzializzati, riuscendo così ad imporre, ad irrompere nel discorso pubblico, decostruendo la rappresentazione dei soggetti altri, che gli stessi movimenti radicali troppo spesso producono per loro.
I'd like to add a final remark. As in parliament or in public discourses, youth radical movements lack the presence of non-whites. Even though these subjects are emerging on the threshold of Italian social life, sport, school, university, workplace, they do not participate, mobilize, or organize in movements that are capable of carrying forward the specific requests these racialized subjects. Thus, they do not break into public discourse, and they do not deconstruct the narrative about the subjectivity of the others that the same radical movements produce on their behalf.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Presentation. I want to open up to the audience for questions. Starting from Nicola on back. Nicola, in our conversation, one of the things that struck me was your discussion of what Zero was part of your reading material. I wanted you to talk to the audience about that. And you emphasized what you call the extra parliamentary role of these youth social movements.
Allora, prima di tutto io ho voluto fare un discorso molto soggettivo,
I had to make a very subjective discourse about it
perché per la mia età non pensavo di poter fare una grande analisi politica, era una questione di onestà.
at my age, I didn't think I was able to do something like that. So
Io però faccio parte di un'organizzazione che si chiama 081,
I'm part of an organization called 081,
che è nata nel 2011
born in 2001.
ed è un'ex mensa dell'università che è stata completamente abbandonata.
It's an ex-Mensa, a part of a university that was completely abandoned.
E visto che era abbandonata, noi abbiamo deciso di occuparla per dare dei servizi per la popolazione e per il quartiere.
Since it was abandoned, we decided to take over and use our organization within the abandoned building.
Infatti per noi è molto importante dare dei servizi,
It's very important for us to give our services
perché pensiamo che sia più importante far capire alla gente che c'è qualcosa oltre lo Stato, che non siano per forza i fascisti.
It's more important to give something.
È più importante per noi
It's more important for us
dare dei servizi alla gente invece che riempirli di parole e di ideologie.
It's more important for us to give the people more
Services.
Yeah. It's more important for us to provide services to people than in an more academic state.
Infatti facciamo un dopo scuola per i bambini in cui invece di lasciarli per strada
So we have an after school program, and instead of leaving the kids outside after school on the street,
perché bisogna dire che Napoli è una città che ha un alto tasso di criminalità,
so because Naples has a pretty high crime rate and is pretty dangerous,
oppure facciamo un ambulatorio medico,
or we have a
servizio medico,
we have a medical service, emergency medical service.
e inoltre facciamo anche uno sportello legale, proprio per dare la possibilità alla gente che non ha i soldi per un avvocato di avere una protezione legale. Dici un servizio.
So, we have a service that provides legal services to the people of Naples as well.
Per noi è molto importante fare questo, però oltre questo abbiamo anche un grande lavoro politico che facciamo in città e organizziamo tutte le manifestazioni antifasciste e antirazziste e soprattutto siamo i primi ad aver parlato di meridionalismo e del problema del colonialismo interno. È molto importante per noi lavorare e fare un grande lavoro politico e non solo di servizi.
It's very important for us to be active and not treat it as an academic kind of ideology as well, and be more active within our community.
E organizziamo anche tanti cortei,
And we organize a lot of movements and a lot of
demonstrations.
demonstrations.
E per questo parliamo soprattutto anche di quelli che sono i problemi del colonialismo interno,
And we talk a lot about the problems with internalized colonialism.
cosa di cui non se ne parla, lo so.
And that we don't talk about, which is not talked about.
Jessica, you talked about two things. One, implicitly, almost Bolsonaro's proposing eugenics in Brazil. The idea of eugenics. A ideia que as pessoas que não servem para nada podem ser extinguidas. And the destruction of houses of Afro-Brazilian worship and of Afro-Brazilian culture. Why do you think Bolsonaro is attacking those elements in Brazilian society? Danger.
Can you hear me? No? I don't know. I don't know.
You try that. No.
I think it's. Now, can you hear me? Ha. All the time when I was talking, I always talk about Bolsonaro, but the problem is much bigger than Bolsonaro itself. It's not only him, but all over his voters and all over his supporters. And I think about the attacks to the Afro-Brazilian religions. It's much more about his supporters. I don't think Bolsonaro himself has like a problem with the Afro-Brazilian religion, but to be elected, he accepted support of the Christian church, and the attack to these houses is a demand of these churches. So when he was elected, he somehow gave legitimacy to these groups. So I don't think it's something about Bolsonaro, but it's about people who see in his figure a possibility to attack what they think that should be eliminated. And that's what's happening with this. It's happening with the religion, Afro-Brazilian religion. It's happening in a bigger context with Afro-Brazilian culture. I couldn't mention, but I suppose you heard about the shameful situation about the carnival. Did you heard?
Yeah.
About the thing? I don't know if I can say it here, because it's kind of embarrassing. Do you know? Carnival, it's a very popular form of black people to fight against racism and to defend our heritage. And Bolsonaro doesn't like it. So he found a way to say bad things, to give some visibility to bad aspects of Carnival. So he found a short video and put it on his Twitter, so it became very popular. Everybody, leaders of all the world saw that. And I think that's all I can say. It was a short video about some. Help me. Can I say? Because it is so. Do you know? Yes, it's about the golden shower.
Yeah, then he tweets like he tweets that, and someone says like, "Oh, this is golden shower," and he asks him, and he tweets like, "What is golden shower?" in his tweet.
All it was. Can you can imagine he's he should be a president. He has so many things to think about, and this is what he put on his Twitter. But we have to see, it's kind of funny. We like to make fun of Bolsonaro, but it is. But he was also trying to show Carnival as a bad thing. He was also trying to to make people think bad things about it, you know, and it's also about, you said, about eugenic. So it's all in the same direction. He is always trying to show us Afro-Brazilian people as people that you cannot trust. That is something that it's better if you were not there. I think that's what he meant when he talked about the quilombolas, was that, like, I'm not going to kill all of them, but it would be much more better if they were not there. But his audience, they said it. They really said it. They used to call Bolsonaro as captain, and he said, "We do it for you, captain." Bolsonaro had a problem in the middle of campaign with he suffered, and somebody tried to kill him, and his supporters published it on Facebook things like, "If you can go, if you can do, captain, we do it for you." And when people are, these people that are showed that's being killed every day, it's not Bolsonaro that's there killing them. Their supporters, they feel comfortable to go there and do it for him. And I think it's about the eugenics, about the Afro-Brazilian religions, and about much more. That's what is happening.
Daryl, for you, one question. You and I had a conversation, or a couple of conversations now, about some of the nuts and bolts of One People's Project and its involvement in anti-fascist and anti-racist mobilization. And I remember in one talk I saw you give, you were talking about the differences between going to spaces to encounter or confront the Proud Boys and other organizations when you're outnumbered, as opposed to other situations where you might have more popular support. And I remember you expressed that, giving the Charlottesville example. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Hello? Okay, got it. Well, you know, when you talk about how to confront the groups out there, it's one thing to deal with government officials here and there. Their shock troops is really where, in many respects, you're going to see your nastiest of fights. Like I said, I went to Charlottesville, and we knew exactly what it was going to be before we even got there, because we knew who we were dealing with. And there is a barometer in how to deal with these various individuals. And I think Charlottesville was, in many respects, that worst case scenario. I mean, now, sometimes when it comes to One People's Project, when we deal with them, we are outnumbered or something like that, or if it's just, in many respects, One People's Projects end up going to some of these things by ourselves. There is no opposition, there is no mobilization, and we would go to their conferences or we would go to their rallies, and what we would do was just simply jot down information, take all the information, and we're going to use it against them later. See, one of the best things about us as a people is that, as I said before, we don't tolerate this nonsense, or I should say, we don't like this nonsense being around. So if we're able to provide people with information as to where it is and who was involved with it, eventually the folks that we're outnumbered by in some given conference is going to hear from the rest of us who weren't there that day. Or you deal with something like Charlottesville or any other white power rally where we outnumber them. And then things can get a little, still can get a little dicey, because now you have to deal with the government. Because here's something that really gets interesting when we do go out there. The police start taking the sides of the fascists. And I'm not saying that it's hyperbole. I was in Portland last year, and we were dealing with the Proud Boys. And the Proud Boys, every month since April of last year, were holding rallies along with another group in Portland called Patriot Prayer. They were holding rallies and basically holding these rallies to actively fight, literally, their political opponents in the streets. That's all they were doing. And it came to a head last June, so people started coming out to basically help out Portland. So on August 4th, instead of fighting Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys, the police decided to attack the anti-fascists. And with the Patriot Prayer Proud Boys folks clapping their hands off. Come to find out a couple of months later that they were working with the police, as we have seen in certain text messages and emails, corresponding with lieutenants in the Portland Police Bureau. And that's still a scandal that they're dealing with right now. We even found out that on August 4th, there were Patriot Prayer individuals taking sniper positions on a rooftop at the rally. And they were chased off by the police, probably because they didn't want them to look that obvious. So, you know, it's kind of fluid when it comes to dealing with these individuals, but it's a matter of knowing how to coordinate your situation whenever you come across it. I think that does that. I think that's just ask, would that answer the question? Yeah.
Okay, now a question?
Yeah, that's almost. That's all.
Thank you to all the panelists.
Now a question?
I wanted to say thank you all for what you've shared with us already. I feel like a lot of the discussion about fascism that we hear in the media now is focused on the rise of presidents, especially, who become the sort of center of attention. So Bolsonaro, Trump, or maybe the Northern League in the Italian case, as well as the sort of electoral politics. But it seems like in the work that all of you do, it's not necessarily as tied directly to that kind of electorally focused or state-centered sort of approach to politics. So Daryl, you mentioned when you have to deal with the government. I think there's a sense that I got is that there's a lot of organizing that has nothing to do with that as well. Jessica, you mentioned that this is an issue that's beyond Bolsonaro as an individual. And Nicola, you talked about going beyond the neoliberal democracy. So I was interested in hearing from each of you about what how you think of the relationship of your work to that sort of maybe more mainstream electorally or state-oriented politics, and how you try to navigate both of those kinds of spaces, and what the importance, if there is one, of still removing certain people from power through electoral means as well.
Ok. Io penso che questo è un problema, naturalmente.
I think that this is a problem.
Ma ogni tanto, quando si entra in gioco su il piano delle elezioni,
When you enter the game with playing with levels and elections,
noi non lo sappiamo fare. Io personalmente penso che la mia organizzazione non è capace di fare questo.
I don't think that my organization is capable of doing that.
Poi è un problema, naturalmente, e una volta che tu hai costruito qualcosa dovrai candidarti, ma se non costruisci non puoi fare niente.
If you don't build or if you don't construct anything, you can't really do can't do much.
So I'm trying to do it because as I said, I'm a teacher in a public school. So I have to, even if I don't want, because it's a public space, the state use it to pay me. I don't know for how much more time they will pay me, but the state used to pay us, teachers like me, to be in a public building teaching students. So we to be there, to maintain the building, to have resources. We don't have other way without leading with not really the president, but now, because look, the situation in Brazil is very complex, because it's not only Bolsonaro, but some governments, governors, majors, they are all in the same side. So it's we don't have other way without them leading with them. I think that today my strategy, I don't know what's going to be tomorrow, but today it's subversion. It's subversion, because I have to deal with that guys to be there. But when the door at my classroom closes, then it's me and the students. And I think the education is still is, for me, the best way. I don't know, maybe the only way to make them. I work with high school, so my students, they have around 17, 18 years old. A lot of them are taking the permission to vote at this age, so it's very important to me. Now it's very complex to talk things about, to say things about against the government, because I mentioned to you the project. So when you're in a class, someone can be with a cell phone, and they can denounce you, and then you can lose your job, your career. So don't say like be attacked outside and something can happen to you. But it's something everything can change very quickly. I don't know for how much time I can do it, but right now I think the space inside my classroom is the space that I have to dialogue with these teenagers and to make them conscious of what's happening, and I think the most important thing is make him understand that they are the targets. Because we have in Brazil a massive campaign, for example, to facilitate the weapon carrying. Is that okay? And my students, in the poorest and blackest area, they think it's okay. It's good, because now when someone comes to me to, I don't know, to rob me, I can react. And I try to show them, look, you won't have a weapon because you're poor, because you're black. And if you have without a weapon, the policeman will kill you. Imagine with a weapon. So it's not for you. But they won't know it if I'm not there to tell them it. Because they won't listen it in any other way. Like the family won't say it, the church won't say it. So I think the best place to do it is the school, are the classrooms.
It was mentioned earlier that I have a documentary on Netflix called Alt-Right Age of Rage. And the producer's original intent was for this documentary to be about Trump's first year. By the time they were done producing it, by the time they were done putting it all together, Trump was probably in it for 10 minutes. And it became a documentary about how the opposing sides were dealing with each other, ultimately. And that's really what it is. What is going on with Trump or with Bolsonaro or with Salvini or with Le Pen or anyone that we're dealing with around the globe is much, much bigger than them.
Yeah.
It's way much bigger than them. And I was asked a while back that how can we incorporate what we do with government politics and all, which I do not want to discount. It's definitely important for us to participate and be a part of that. But we also have to remember that in the end, it's really nothing more than a barometer as to where we're at. And if we want to get somewhere, we have to basically encourage each other to go in a certain direction, away from the Trumps and the Salvinis and Bolsonaros, because the only reason why they are where they're at today is because of based on how involved we, the people, are. And I will tell you something, it's something to bear in mind here. Trump, as in the case with Bush, were not elected popularly. It's just by the machinations of our electoral process here in America that they're where they are today, that they ended up becoming president. We never asked for them. We never wanted them. Take a look at what's going on in Israel right now with Netanyahu. He lost, but he built a coalition with other parties in Israel, and he is still where he is today and where he's been for a good 20 years or so. I mean, I think there was a headline that I saw after the election there that now we can say that Israel's being run by a dictatorship. And that is important for us to recognize it, because it makes us realize just how strong we are. And it's just a matter of, it is just a matter of recognizing that. So whatever it is we do, whatever it is we insist upon, is going to inform how our governments are going to look. And that's really, we have to start from the grassroots, ultimately. That's where it begins, that's where it's going to end.
I wanted to ask you, in your analysis, how you think that the ideology of law works in naturalizing fascist and authoritarian governance. And I'm thinking about this in the sense of, for example, like in the Bush administration in the US, the Patriot Act was, a set of laws that really did a lot of work to increase kind of authoritarian governance in the US, but it was legal and it's been kind of naturalized. And I think even in the imagination of the Trump era, people forget that, like, these longer processes. And or for example, we talk about a lot of times about extrajudicial killings, but we have a system in this country that, legally cages lots and lots of people. And so I think sometimes that kind of believing in the legal, what is legal and what seems aberrant is really, can be very useful to naturalize these kind of things. And one of the reasons I think it's particularly important, at least in the US case, is the way that racist violence is being played out against immigrants. And that the kind of, but because the criminalization of immigrants has been so successful in this country, that that can happen legally. And so I just want to ask you how this kind of idea of what gets considered legal and how this idea that then makes things okay, and that is its own kind of way of normalizing these kind of things, how you think about that.
Well, it's odd when you talk about Trump, because he is doing a lot of things that we thought would get the average person locked up, get a president locked up. You're not supposed to put kids in cages. You're not supposed to have a ban on Muslims. These are things that are supposed to be against the law. That's what we've been told all our lives, and yet they're happening. So the question now, as you said, is what is the law? Are we going by laws, or are we just going by the whims of whomever's in power? Are we going to adhere to the law that they say that they have in place? Or is the law worth the paper that it's written on? I think if anything we get out of this current climate, out of this current administration, I think the biggest lesson that we are going to learn is just how fickle the law can be. And the question that we have going forward is how to not make it so. We have to start asking, how are we going to make sure that we are going to be a just society? Because and one of the things that just glaring at me right now is the question of whether or not a president can pardon himself. The answer should be no. If the answer is not no, then we have to make it so. I think that after Trump leaves, if our government goes in the direction it should, I think there's going to be a ton of amendments that are going to make sure that this never happens again. If the law was the law, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't trust the government, don't trust the law. But if the law was the law, then we must insist on it.
Yeah, you said something that makes me think, like, if the law was the law. I think
I'm
the law
trying to be
is
careful.
the law is not the law in Brazil. I think since
Neither in Italy,
yeah.
everywhere.
I think we always have problems with the law, but since in 2016, when they used the law to take off the presidency, a woman, a honest woman, and after that moment, they, how can I say that? They put our constitution in the trash. This makes sense, because And after that, we don't know what is law anymore. There is a man in jail that they can prove that he is guilty. That's Lula. And he is arrested. He's in jail for more than a year. And they don't have any proofs against him. But he's in jail. So what's the law? How we can? Brazil right now is a place that we can just all this. 2 weeks ago, I show you the pictures of a family that was shot. Nothing happens. Can you understand this? Nothing happens. The man that did it, they are at home right now. And the president said this was an accident, and that an accident happened. So what's the law? Where is the law? And then we can see, and then we go to the prisons and have thousands and thousands of Afro-Brazilians arrested. Some of them with no reason. And other men are killing people every day and nothing happens. And we have innocents in jail, like a political prisoner, like Lula. That's an former president. So it is big, it's huge. And nobody does nothing. I think to be in Brazil right now and seeing that the law is not working anymore, it's how people don't react. I think that Brazil should be burning on fire right now with everything that's happening, but it's not. A lot of people can't see the difference between. That's very important for me. I know that I'm repeating myself, but the whole played by the churches and by the Christian fundamentalism is so huge because people don't know anymore what is sin and what is crime. And that helps a lot to make people think that somebody can be shot in the streets and you say, but that's not the law. And someone will answer you, oh, but you don't know what he did. It doesn't matter. You can't shot people in the streets. But they don't have this sense anymore. So I don't know if we can dialogue, or if we can count on the law anymore.
Io penso principalmente che il problema non è la retorica della legge, ma quella della giustizia.
I think that the problem is it's not the rhetorical of the law, but it is the rhetorical of the justice system.
Perché quello che legge e giustizia dovrebbero essere la stessa cosa.
Law and justice should be the same thing.
Ma non lo sono e lo sappiamo benissimo.
Sì.
But they're not, and we all know.
Quindi rispondendo alla prima domanda,
Responding to the first question,
non penso che tutta la retorica della legge non funziona per la lotta politica.
all of the rhetoric for law doesn't really function with anything related to politics.
E questa è la base per cercare di costruire una nuova ideologia che possa realmente sconfiggere il fascismo.
This is the ideology to construct.
È la base
It's the base to construct
una nuova ideologia che possa realmente sconfiggere il fascismo e tutti questi personaggi.
a new ideology to deconstruct fascism and everything else.
Come Bolsonaro, Salvini e Trump.
Like Bolsonaro.
Salvini e Trump.
I asked him in a phone conversation, Renee, what he and his group were reading for this kind of analysis. He says, Gramsci, of course.